Hey guys, Bryce and Barb, back here at Bryce's Corner. Do you have a friend who stands like this all the time? Or do you stand like this all the time? A lot of times when I'm evaluating clients, when they have hip pain, it could be knee pain, lower back pain, SI joint pain, any sort of like discomfort that they might have in their body, one of the first things that I try to evaluate, aside from just looking at their general posture, is what is the routine of the day? So a lot of times when I'm speaking to any of my patients that come in or any of the clients that come in, automatically as they sit there and they talk to me, they're always in some sort of posed position. Now a lot of times we see these not only when people are in sort of that comfort mode and they're talking and they're gesturing and they always stand in that one posture, but a lot of times they'll stand because they are avoiding pain, right? You'll shift away from some pain that you might have. Like if I had right hip pain, I might move over to my left side all the time because I don't want to feel the pain on the side where I'm weight bearing through my body. So a lot of times I'm looking at ergonomics of what people are doing all day long. When you're sitting at a desk, do you constantly shift or sit in a way that you cross a leg all the time, or shift in your seat because you have a computer and a mouse? Are you leaning forward into your desk? How do you drive? What's the ergonomics inside your car? All of these things add up throughout the day, because if you're moving, you're talking, you're sitting, you're in these static poses for a long period of time, that can be very problematic and start to weigh and stress on the body. So we want to correct these things. A lot of times what I initially do is I give all the clients homework and I say, okay, I want you to try to catch yourself in these asymmetrical positions throughout the day. And sometimes I say, set an alarm every 15-20 minutes and catch yourself in these different postures, because it's very subconscious that we get into these positions, especially if we're working on a computer or if we're in conversations and we're not really paying attention to what the posture of our body is doing. Yeah, and sleep is actually one that you found years ago, where Barb was having a lot of hip pain because, again, when she was sleeping, she had that one leg up posture. So there's a lot of things that we subconsciously do or we're not aware that we do throughout the day that can put stress in our soft tissue, our joints, and in our body. So we're going to give you a couple stretches and a couple awareness tools that you guys can use throughout the day so that you can feel better. First thing we want to look at is just what is good posture when you're standing. So usually, again, people are going to have different environments that they're in. We want to make sure that your feet are relatively flat to the ground, about hip width apart. If we can have the weight of the body more in the middle of the foot, you don't want to be loaded into the front of your feet, which is typically what we see with most people, is that you're leaning. Everybody leans into the front of their feet because we're moving forward. So a lot of times we're just moving in that way. But that tends to make us lean forward in the posture too. So then looking at something like the posture of the pelvis. Now, a lot of times, depending on the environment of our shoes, if we're in a elevated heel position, the automatic response is that you're in more of an anterior tilt, which is one reason that people wear heels. So we want to try to maintain what would be more of a neutral spine. We want to have our normal curve of our lower spine. We don't want to flatten it totally out, but we want to make sure that our pelvis is in a good posture underneath us so we don't have a lot of stress in our lower backs or on our SRI joint or our hips. The other thing we want to think about is just the upper body is stacked over top of the lower body. So again, we're not leaning forward, we're not in that rounded shoulder posture or slouched position with our spine and our shoulder blades. So we want to try to have that chest position up, we want to have the shoulder blades slightly back, and then the most important one, which is hard for most people, and try this at home, is trying to have your cheekbone over your collarbone. So if that cheekbone drops straight down towards that collarbone, that's a good head position. Or you can even think about the ears in line with the shoulder. We just want to make sure that the head is over the top of the shoulders are over the pelvis, and the pelvis is over the feet. That would be a normal standing posture. Now, to be casual, you don't want to feel like you're a robot and you're like this statue. So you want to be loose, you want to be free, you don't want to feel like you're holding on to your body, but you do want to be conscious and aware of like how you are standing, because again, that could be a lot of different postural stress that you have over weeks, months, years that starts to materialize as some discomfort in the body. The next thing that we're going to look at is just seated posture. So go ahead and have a seat. Typically when you're sitting at a desk or you're sitting down, you again want to try to have your feet flat to the ground. Your feet should be around hip width apart. If you go a little bit of a wider stance, that's totally fine too. And then you want to try to find a position with the back of the chair or whatever type of sitting environment that you're in, that you can keep that spine upright and that head nice and tall. Ergonomics wise, if you're at a desk and you're working on a computer, you want to have the middle of the screen right with your eyes. So that computer screen should be up here so that you're looking your eyes straight forward instead of down on a desk where you might be looking down at the computer. Especially if you're working on a laptop, always very difficult to keep that head or keep that posture. Smaller screen, it's usually down and forward, and then everybody kind of hunches into it. Not to mention phone posture. When people are looking down at their phones, they're usually shifted off to one side, looking with one arm out to the side where their head's all tilted. Those are things that we need to kind of look at when we want to try to manage any of our symptoms of discomfort. Is that looks pretty awesome to hold your phone like this, you know, but working with your phone where you have your phone up towards your eyes as opposed to down in this position where you're putting a lot of stress potentially through the neck, the upper back, or even the lower back. So then lastly, I actually want to look at what sleeping posture would look like and what some things that you can do in your sleeping posture to try to minimize any stress to your hips and pelvis and lower back. So go ahead and stand up. Okay, so now we have Barb in a lying position. Typically, a lot of people sleep on their sides. One of the best postures that you can sleep in is typically on your back. Sometimes even on your back, you have to do things like elevate the legs a little bit so that you can keep that lower back flat. And that would be in more of an extreme case of having some lower back pain or SI joint pain. So typically a lot of us will sleep on our side because we're, you know, I don't know, it takes me to get on my side to fall asleep. So once you're in this position, you need to make sure that the pillow is at a height that your head is in line with your spine. A lot of times also to take the pressure away from that down shoulder, because if you're really weighted into that down shoulder, that shoulder will shrug up towards the ears and it can press a lot towards the neck. The next thing is usually if people, even if they have stacked legs, especially for women, the pelvis is wider than what the width of the legs is. So the top leg here is angling down across the midline of the body, which can be very impinging inside the hip here, or rotates the pelvis or puts pressure on the SI joint, or even weighs too much on the bottom leg where it starts to inflame or compress that bottom hip. So the other thing is again, once you have your wide shoulders and wide hips, the hourglass figure of your body, the spine also sags down towards the floor, right? So now you have this side bending posture of your spine, which can put a lot of stress into there. So at minimum, what we usually look at is, I usually tell a lot of my clients to get body pillows that kind of run the length of their body, and either putting that pillow between the knees so that when they sleep, now that this is at more of a parallel position so that there's not a lot of compression into the bottom hip or the top hip, there's usually less rotation in the pelvis because now you have something stable that you're kind of hanging on to. And then at minimum, if these legs are in a better position, that takes some of the stress away from the lower back. But again, if you move your bottom leg out of here, a lot of times people will change their position and now the bottom leg's out of the way. This will again keep that top leg in more of a aligned position, whereas if she put that leg down, now she's really rotated forward and that puts a lot of stress on that lower back as well. So then go face down. Face down sleeping, you know, there's a special kind of person that I think finds the most comfort sleeping face down, because you know, you have to rotate your head a lot to be in the pillow. Sometimes if the pillow's too high, now you're rotating and in extension. And a lot of times you can see, again, if you elevate the upper body, now you're arching through that lower back and potentially putting pressure into that lower back or in the SI joints. And then if your feet have to, like her feet are hanging off of here, but the feet have to find their position with the flat mattress and the covers. And what does that do as far as the position of the legs in the lower half of the body? So again, these are going to be more acute positions where if you already have some pain or you're potentially trying to figure out where pain is coming from, that if your sleeping posture is not more symmetrical or organized in some way where you're trying to take the stress off some of these parts of your body, that's going to be more of a problem. So evaluate yourself, try to look at what your daily routine looks like. How do you stand? How do you sit? How do you walk? How do you talk to people? How do you lay down? All of these different asymmetries that we constantly do subconsciously in our body all day long really kind of weigh over on our body, especially over many, many years. So take notice of what's going on in your body. If you do have some of these problems, try to correct them, because that would be the foundation and managing any of the drivers that you have as far as a problem goes. But then we're going to give you a couple stretches that you can do to try to alleviate these things. So the first stretch we're going to give you, which is a stretch that's pretty common for most of us to use in our athletic life, is the figure 4 stretch. So again, if you've got hip pain, you've got SI joint pain, you've got some lower back pain, this is one of our go-to stretches for treating all of those areas, which is going to be just a glute stretch. So figure 4, you're going to cross the ankle over the knee, you're going to get both hands around one of your thighs, and you're going to try to press that knee away from you with your elbow, trying to keep your spine flat. Relax that shoulder a little bit. Try to look your eyes down so that you keep your head in a nice neutral position. And then as you pull that thigh towards you, trying to keep the pelvis level, you're pushing the elbow away from you. Flex both of your ankles like you're trying to pull the toes towards the knee, the little toes towards the knee, and you should feel some stretch in that crossed over leg position, right? Definitely. And so what that's going to do is that's going to help free up some of that maybe unbalanced tissue that you might have from standing in a particular way all the time. And one thing that you may notice if you switch sides is one side tighter than the other, which is very common, because again, if I stand into one position all the time and I put more load into one side of my body, one side might feel more tight than the other. So we want to try to balance those things out. Usually our protocol is always going to be 30 seconds times 3 rounds, but you got to find your own time that feels good for you and the amount of reps that you might try to do to try to free up and create mobility for your body. So the glute stretch is going to be one of our key ones, and we'll show you another exercise after we move the table. Okay, so the other stretch that we want to look at is what can we do for the front of the hip, because a lot of times we get that pain in the front of the hip, especially if we're in these sort of awkward asymmetrical positions that impinges the hip. Again, we've done a stretch like this before in some of our other videos, which is a psoas stretch. This just kind of should ring true to you that these are some stretches that really every day you should be working on to try to normalize your body. So psoas stretch, hip flexor, something in the front of the hip. We're going to do it the other way, okay? Because we're stretching the... All right, so you're in a forward stepped position. Before you shift forward, you want to pivot on your knee to slide your foot out wide so that you create a little rotation in that down hip, which is the side that we're stretching. You want to make sure that the front foot is stepped a little bit wide so you have some balance, and a little bit forward because we're going to shift forward into the stretch. The next thing that we really want to look at is keeping the spine nice and tall. You want to tuck your pelvis underneath you. So you're trying to scoop that pelvis and rotate it back and underneath you. Go ahead and take both arms forward. You're going to stretch out both of your arms to elongate. You're going to stay tall through your spine. And then as you maintain this tuck position, you're going to shift forward into the stretch to try to increase the hip extension, or the stretch in front of this left hip in this case. Lean a little bit forward into it with your upper body. We want to make sure that we don't go forward and sag the pelvis forward. So show us an example of that, where she's really sagging with her lower spine and the pelvis just drops. We want to keep that tuck position. The shoulder is going to be a little bit forward of the pelvis, and then she's going to shift forward without losing this position so that we can keep that stretch in front of that left hip. She's going to do this again. Breathe, do it for 30 seconds, 3 rounds. We're going to switch right and left sides to make sure that we balance across the pelvis. So go ahead and relax that. And then you can switch on to the other side.
Is it important that your toes tucked under, or?
In the back foot? So the question is it important, what's the foot posture here? Really doesn't matter. Whatever feels comfortable for your foot. Sometimes people feel like the foot's going to cramp. So usually I say tuck your toes under just to keep the tension in the foot. Move that foot forward more. So Barbara's doing a good job controlling her pelvis, but just make sure that before you shift forward that you try to tuck that pelvis underneath you, lengthen your spine, reach both arms forward, try to shift forward so that that front knee is pushing forward over the toes. But again, try not to sag, try not to lose the lower spine, chin is down, and we're trying to elongate forward with that upper body, up away from the pelvis as we tuck. And again, now she's trying to feel that stretch in the front of the right hip. Again, as we do some of these stretches from the right and the left, we may find that we have different tensions on either side of the body. And so where you potentially feel more tight on a right and left side, maybe spend an extra round of stretching into that hip, or with the glute stretch, or with the psoas stretch. Those are going to be some of the easiest stretches that you can do. If you do those 2 stretches for your glutes and for your hip flexors, that will give you a lot of balance for your lower spine, your hips, and your pelvis if you're having some discomfort in those areas. If you have some additional questions about some exercises that you might be able to do to try to balance yourself out, if you find yourself in these different asymmetrical positions and you do have some discomfort, even if it's in the upper body, let us know. Comment below and we'll get back to you.